And not, we're weirdos in California, we like to have fusion.
I'll do it just to see what
I mean, I'll put peanut sauce in.
I mean, I think we're probably.
Hello, welcome. Please sign in. Hi, welcome. We have some pizza. We're doing
Hello, everyone. I think we're going to start now. So first, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday evening coming and learning a little bit more about the pre-proposal process for Big Ideas. I myself am Danny Bicknell, Program Manager. I'm seeing some familiar faces, but please feel free to introduce yourself afterwards. We also have Francis Gonzalez. He's the Network Manager.
Hi, everyone.
And he deals with our rather large group of judges and mentors, over 350, right?
Yep.
That will be judging the pre-proposal and final proposal and also providing mentoring during the second stage. So we'd really like to make this interactive. We created this workshop to answer all of your questions. So I'll go through all of the elements, but if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. We're also live streaming this because we are open to the other UCs. So if you don't mind waiting for us to grab you a mic, then your question might be a question that somebody else at a participating campus might have. Let's just get a quick show of hands, though. How many of you have an idea and you need consulting advice on your idea and you're looking for some one-on-one advising? Okay, great. Seeing there's a few hands. How many of you are still recruiting team members, looking for people to join? Okay, cool. That's great. I'm seeing like 3 hands. And then how many of you have already created some type of outline or have some type of structure for your Big Ideas project? Okay, cool. So hopefully this will give you a little bit more guidance, and you've already put in some of the work, so that's a great start. Now, just a really quick agenda. I'm going to go over some reminders of the application process. We'll do an overview of the pre-proposal elements, talk about a previous pre-proposal example so that you guys have some like tangible real-life guidelines. And then we're going to go over a section of the pre-proposal that judges in the past have commented on being the weakest section, and this is the competitive landscape section. So let's begin, shall we? Now, some of you have come and said, how many teams win? What did they win? What's up with the winners? And I just wanted to give you some statistics from last year. So we had 300 applicant teams from last year. 70 of them went from the pre-proposal to the final round, and then 43 were winning teams. Last year, our biggest winner won $11,000. So they won the first place for the pitch day competition, and then they won second place in their category. First place is $9,000, second place is $6,000, third place $4,000, honorable mention $2,000, and then we have a pitch day and People's Choice video contest where you can win additional funds. So if you were able to win first place in your category and win either the People's Choice video contest or first place in the pitch day, you could win up to $15,000. So it's great. But the average, I'd say, is about $5,000 for a winning team. Now, here are the categories and some of the rules. The team lead must be a matriculated student at an eligible campus. And does anyone have any questions about what matriculated means? Okay. The project has to be student initiated and student led, and 1 category per idea. So if you have 2 very unique categories, feel free to apply separately, but you can't use that one idea and apply in multiple categories. Is that clear? Okay, great. It took me a few times.
Yeah, and just to clarify what we mean by student initiated, it's fine if you're working with an outside group, if you have advisors outside of campus, but we just want to make sure that the idea that you propose to Big Ideas is something that you're really driving, something that you've come up with, and it's not something that they're just looking to get a little extra funding for and kind of going through you to get to that funding.
Yeah, we're all about investing in students.
Yep.
So, and then really quickly, do we have any scaling up applicants in the room? Okay. Well, just to let you know, that's a different set of criteria, and it's only available to people that have won a big ideas category in the past, but I can answer those questions at a different time. So let's talk about this pre-proposal timeline. Now, we have about 4 weeks left, so you guys are in the right place by coming to this writing workshop. You've already got an added advantage. And I just wanted to kind of highlight some key dates. So across the top, please come and see me for advising. I'm not the only advisor that's available. Francis, Philip Denny, the program director, and a few others are actually available. So if you can't find a time on the calendar, that's at bigideascontestorg/advising. Let us know. We're also, as we get closer to the deadline, going to make additional advising hours. And all of our appointments can be in person. If you have the ability, I always think it's better to work in person. But if not, we can do Skype. You choose the medium. We'll make ourselves available to you. One of our workshops that is a new workshop this year is the, it is the Inventing Green workshop on October 22nd. You might have seen some flyers at the front. This is a really cool workshop if you're interested in incorporating sustainable design principles into your project from the get-go. Jeremy Faludi is actually a leader in sustainable design, has written a toolkit with VentureWell that demonstrates how you can incorporate sustainable design into any type of project, and he's really interested in giving you real-time feedback. So he wants the workshop to be dynamic, come with questions about what you're kind of grappling with, and there will be plenty of opportunity to kind of work on what you're already doing or what you're passionate about. We have another writing workshop. We try and be really iterative with what students have, the feedback they've given us. So the judges this time around said, we'd really like you to focus on competitive landscape. The next workshop, however, will focus on storytelling for innovation. So I'm sure, as you know, being an entrepreneur or a researcher, if you want to captivate an audience, you have to have that story be really tight, consistent, concise, and engaging. So we're going to have a guest speaker from Open IDEO come and kind of give you some tips of the trade on how to make your story captivating for your audience.
Yeah. And if you wanted to catch just his section of that workshop, you could come around 6:45 and we'll be moving into that portion.
Thanks. Then we have the industry advising clinic. So you can see that is much closer to the deadline. That's going to be on November 7th, where you can actually sign up one-on-one and get expert advice from an industry expert in your field, depending on which category you're applying to. So as we get closer to the date, we'll open up that advising and you can kind of see who we have and then you can sign up. But we'll give you more information about that in a little bit. Then,
we already have some great people lined up for that. One guy, his name is Ryan Shaning Picasso, works for SPZ Legal. So if you're at the point where you're trying to figure out, maybe do you incorporate as a nonprofit or maybe go a for-profit route, he's a great person to talk to. We have someone from Facebook who works on their global health partnerships. So we'll have around 8 or so different people, and you can sign up for 30-minute advising sessions with them at that event.
Yeah. And then our last push is going to be an editing blitz, where we will basically be holding big chunks of time where we can give you feedback on your pre-proposals. I've mentioned this before, but the advisors, we don't judge. We're not judges. So the judges will give us information. We'll pass that on to you, try and help you get the best pre-proposal, and then hand it off to the judges. And so the super important date for the pre-proposal deadline is Wednesday, November 14th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's a really hard deadline. So I recommend that you guys kind of, maybe you can open up the application beforehand, start drafting some things. We're going to go through it together. But let me know if there's any questions around that or any issues before the deadline? So this judging criteria that we have is mostly based on innovation. So you can kind of see, let's see, the idea that you're presenting, the solution that you're presenting, is it novel, unique, or does it kind of create a creative solution to the proposed problem? Now, the next section, that is the second largest section, 25%, is the potential for impact. So the event to which the proposed project addresses this pressing problem and the extent that your team can provide sufficient statistics, research for the reader to understand the problem. Viability is 15% of the score, so how are you able to show that this project is viable, addresses the community in the right way? Category challenge, I've mentioned this a few times to some students, but the judges are going to have background in the category that you're applying for, so you want to make sure that there is a right category fit. And in general, I would say you're writing for a generalist audience, but it's very good to keep that in mind. And then quality. You only have 3 pages to kind of demonstrate the different elements in the pre-proposal, and so you want to make sure that it makes sense, it's well organized, there's no typos. That stuff is very, very important.
Yeah, just that, copy editing at the end to make sure there's no little mistakes is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of this in the past, so please have an extra set of eyes look over your pre-proposal before you submit it. It's always very helpful.
So actually, maybe before we go on, does anyone have any questions about the judging criteria?
Yeah, Francis,
breakdown?
he deals directly with all the judges.
Yeah, if you just go back real quick.
yeah.
I think the main thing that we want to emphasize at this point in the pre-proposal round is that innovation and potential for impact are, most heavily weighted. So we're really looking, and we feel like that levels the playing field. So teams that are coming in with a lot more years of work behind their idea, if it's not a really innovative idea or if it doesn't have that potential for impact, they are going to have a hard time going up against a team who's maybe just come up with their idea, but it does meet, it's that new and creative approach. So in the pre-proposal round, really heavily weighted on innovation and what's new. And then in the full proposal round, it flips and viability becomes much more important. So you really want to convince the judges at this stage that what you're putting forward is a really cool and exciting new approach.
Great. So I'm going to do a little mock application so you can kind of see what we're working with. Now, in general, the application takes about 20 minutes, and when I open it up, you can see that there are many opportunities to copy and paste information. So just a word to the wise, you might want to draft some of these things in like a Google Doc or something. So when in doubt, you always have an extra copy. But let's pretend like I'm applying for big ideas. Let's start at the very beginning. If you go to bigideascontestorg, you will see a tab that says Compete. And then if you click on the Categories tab, you can see on the left that there are different category icons, and depending on which category you're deciding to apply in, you can click on the icon. I'm going to pretend like I am applying to the Connected Communities category. Now, each category has examples of previous big ideas winners. We also talk about the challenge to kind of give you some idea of like what this category has looked like in the past and what we kind of expect from it. But once you're ready to apply, you click on that button that says Apply Now. And it's going to take you to this portal, the Big Ideas portal. So also, just to let you know, if you have applied for Big Ideas in the past, you still need to create a login. It's not going to remember your last year's login because this is a whole new year. So you can just put in your email. Phew. Okay, that worked the first time. Yes. And here we go. Now let me see. Actually, can I grab the handheld for this one?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys like the dramatic pauses in between, but. So please read the instructions. I know that that's like a given, but in this like super fast-paced world, it is very important that you read these instructions. And if you have any questions about it, you can let us know. But as you will see that there are many drop-down bars, and you have the option of saving your draft. In addition, in order to move on, you can click the next, and you'll see that there are a few options to copy and paste your kind of elevator pitch. This is a really short version, 50 words or less. And then there are other sections where you can copy and paste more detailed parts of your pre-proposal. This is not part of your 3 pages. These are additional questions that we asked, so just to let you know. Let's see. There is also a button for public dissemination. So if you would like to keep all of this confidential, you don't really want anyone else to see this, you can absolutely click on it if you don't want your pre-proposal shared. And then at the very end, you'll have that option to upload your pre-proposal PDF, please. And then we have a survey at the end. So like I said, it looks like it might be short, but especially the survey helps us create a better program year after year. So please take some time to answer the questions honestly and open, and it's confidential. So there's a qualitative section and then a quantitative section. And you will always have an option at the very end to review your pre-proposal. So that will just give you a big summary of everything that you have submitted. You can double check. And then you can hit that big scary submit button at the end. But you guys are gonna come to all the workshops, we're gonna have a good time, so it's not gonna be scary in the end. Okay, moving right along.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, does that make sense? Here, I can, yeah.
What are the benefits of the public dissemination option?
Francis, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, it's mainly you are allowing us to share when we put together little overviews of the projects that we got in each year in each category. You would allow us to share that with judges and just on our website. So if you really don't want anyone to know about your work, you can decline to share it, but otherwise it's just in kind of, publications and things like that.
Yeah, it's mostly for internal use and to like let judges know what we've kind of dealt with in the past, and then eventually we're going to be using a pre-proposal from a previous year, so they obviously didn't click on that button. So now the pre-proposal rules. We have 3 pages. It's about 1,600 word limit, but that does not include your references. But please note that your references are not an appendix. So we can't have an appendix with extra graphs and other things. If you move on to the full proposal round, obviously you'll have more of an opportunity. But another key thing to notice is that in the pre-proposal, a timeline and a budget is not required. If you think it's integral to kind of talking about your innovation or your proposed solution, you can mention it, but this pre-proposal is really meant to wow and captivate your audience, and as Francis mentioned before, focus on that innovation part. Okay, So these are the 4 different sections that are crucial to the judging criteria, but the format can be flexible. So if you found that you're able to tell your story in 3 different ways, you don't have to follow it exactly as it's numbered above, but if you are missing a section or it's not clearly called out, you can use this as a template. It's not necessary, but remember that judges read about 6 to 8 proposals. And so as long as they can clearly see that all those 4 elements are in there, great. The rest is up to you. So let's focus on the first part. Now, that is the problem. So this is kind of creating like your connection to the issue at hand. So you want to showcase your knowledge of the problem. A mix of qualitative and quantitative information helps, but you don't want to make your approach too overly emotional or personal if you can't back it up with some statistics or research. At the same time, you don't want to repeat obvious statistics over and over again. Although I mentioned that this is a generalist audience, if you make a statement like global poverty is a problem, and then you have 5 or 6 statistics that back it up, I think that's probably overdoing it. We all understand that global poverty is something that wants to be eradicated, and one statistic kind of defining what that is plenty. And also, oh yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, if you have, even though I said you don't want to make it too personal, if you have a personal connection to the demographic or the place, especially if it's not local, these can be local or international problems. It's a stronger case if you are from that place that's outside of where we are right now. Let's, say Canada. I was born and raised in Canada, really understand the demographic. That will help. As opposed to just saying this is the place that I want to use because I read it in a book and it seemed really cool.
Yeah, and so part of this is helping the judges understand, of all of the problems out there in the world, how did you decide to focus on this one? And then the big thing is balancing both the research and the statistics with some of those more human elements, whether they're stories or quotes from users, that sort of thing.
And then another place that I find is good to note is that you want to use statistics very strategically. You don't want to use a statistic that is only, or piece of research that's only somewhat related to your problem. So an example that I found is if your innovation is a water filter, poverty rates within that country could definitely be related, but it'd be actually better to give numbers on the percentage of folks in that rural community that don't have access to clean water, since your innovation is directly related to that. And I'd also recommend identifying a target population. So even if your end goal is to have a global approach, there's only so much you can really do within a year. So you want to be more specific about the target population and where you want to start. And if you've worked with the target population before and you want to address a new area, just be really specific about why you want to address that specific demographic or target population.
So any questions about the problem statement section?
Does anyone have yeah.
Should our projects should be done in a year, or can it be a bigger project?
Good question.
And should we talk about if it's only going to be for a year, should we only talk about a certain part of it?
So I would say that it doesn't have to be definitive within a year. At Big Ideas, we're investing in your early stage idea. So we understand that this process, and especially the timeline, can change. But I think we use that as a metric for which you to stay focused. So let's say in an idyllic situation, if we were to give you the money and the resources right now, how would you apply that within a year timeline? I think that's a much easier way to kind of describe your pre-proposal in a concise way than thinking about these overarching goals that might be 5-10 years down the line. Yeah.
And you can offer your vision for what your project looks like at that 5-year scale, but talk in more detail about what the first year will look like.
So like 1 or 2 implementation trips or that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the pre-proposal, you won't need to get into too much detail in terms of what that first year will look like, but the full proposal, that implementation plan is a big part of.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, the timeline isn't necessary, but maybe it's just like a guiding star that you can kind of frame your pre-proposal. So the second part is the landscape analysis, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in detail, but we've noticed that if students propose an idea without identifying any other innovations that have effectively addressed the problem at hand, it looks like they probably haven't done their research. I'd say first and foremost, having competitors or other people in your space is not a bad thing. You can actually use these people as potential partners or collaborators. So first and foremost, I wouldn't smack talk any potential competitors, because in the future they could be key partners or collaborators. What you can do in this space is identify the gaps. So if they're doing something but you address a gap in their application, that's great. And you can do that in a nice way, but also it will show the judges that you've done your research, you know who else is in this space, and that is a much better situation than you assuming that there are no competitors, because if a judge can think in their head of a competitor and you haven't called them out, then their assumption is that you're really missing a key part of that innovation. So you can also use this space to kind of look at your different competitors and see what has worked well, what they have learned, what you have learned from looking at the different existing solutions or existing competitors, and kind of examine like what problems still exist and why they haven't, addressed it in the way that you would like to address it. So kind of really filling the gaps in there. Okay, so now we're moving on to the proposed innovation. Now this is the heart of your proposal, and you want to kind of explain your goals and the abstract thing that you're aiming to achieve. So the goal is kind of like this overarching thing, and the objectives are how you are going to get there. So for an example, if the goal is to reduce poverty in the Bay Area, the objective could be create a 1-year job training program for 100 low-income workers that focus on just resume building or just job training. If you can see that I was really specific about numbers and the specific implementation I was going to use, that does not leave the judge to guess about anything else. You also want to acknowledge that your proposed innovation kind of feeds directly from the landscape analysis. So in that previous section, you're talking about the existing solutions, the other people, the other players in your space, but then your proposed innovation kind of closes that gap by saying, but this is what I'm doing that's truly innovative or creative or novel or addressing something in a new way. As I mentioned before, you kind of want to talk about that first year of implementation. You want to focus on that first year of implementation, but you want to talk about the end goal in general, because you want to use your words carefully to talk about how you're going to wow your audience, like wow the space that you're working in. And using words carefully and concisely will work to your advantage, but I have to warn you that if you use buzzwords and you don't clearly explain what you're trying to do, don't assume that the judge understands where you're coming from. So an example that I can think of, if you say, well, my product is more sustainable, does that mean that it has a lower environmental impact, or that it will last for a longer period of time? If you just use that word, the judge might not really understand. So instead of using buzzwords, I would just go straight for the most concise.
Explaining.
Yeah, just
explaining it.
Yeah, just explain it. There you go. I didn't have to use any buzzwords
Use the
there.
buzzword as long as you back it up with, yeah.
Yeah. And one of my pet peeves is when people use acronyms and they don't call them out. So, like, you can use it once and then put the acronym in parentheses, but don't assume that the judge knows the acronym that you're talking about. I'd also use this section to call out any key partnerships. So it's okay that you don't have these partners in place, but you want to be realistic about where you are in this process and who can help you get there. So imagine being a judge and saying, okay, well, this is a really great proposed innovation. They've called out some key players that they would like to work with. And look at me, I actually have connections with these key players. So that's going to motivate me to want to score them in a way that I know I can help them in this second round. So as I've mentioned before with some students in advising sessions, even though you're trying to captivate your audience, you can be realistic about where you are in the process and what you need. And the more specific you are about where you are in the process and what needs you have, the better the mentors and the judges can kind of help you in the next stage. And it will show that you know where you are really well. So there won't be any guessing or like kind of imagining like, okay, in a perfect world it'd be like this. You're calling out like, I know this space really well. This is what I'm lacking. If I have this, I can get from A to B. And I think that really motivates judges.
Yeah, and with the partnerships, it's all about just figuring out what your value add is. I mean, if you have a global health project and you want to contribute to reduction of malaria and you want to help get more bed nets out there, partnering with the big global health companies who have that whole system in place is going to make more sense than you somehow distributing 100,000 bed nets. So, find where you can add value and the partners that you can really work with to reach that end goal. And then actually, other thing that we really want to encourage students to do is to talk about your challenges.
Yes.
So, I feel like sometimes we don't want to go there because we don't want the judges to see our weaknesses. But it really, I think for early stage innovations, it shows that you're thinking ahead, that you know what those big challenges are going to be. And it just, I think it shows the judges that you have a level of maturity that you know what's going to be ahead. And then you can talk about ways that you think you can overcome those challenges. So be honest.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of students also think challenge equals failure or presumed failure. That's not the case at all. Challenge means you can overcome it. You just need A, B, and C to help you get there. So if you call it out in your pre-proposal, that's great.
Yeah. The question that I'm always asking myself when I read these proposals is, why hasn't someone done this already? If you're not kind of addressing that in some way, the judges are just left to kind of come up with their own ideas.
Yeah, you want to eliminate doubt from the judges so that they can say, oh, wow, all those questions already answered. Mm-hmm. The team bios. So we definitely promote interdisciplinary teams. I think having diverse people at the table promoting your project really will lead for a strong project in the end. So your team bios kind of showcase how each team member contributes directly to the project. Highlight their relevant experience. You don't have to go into great detail because we are aware of the page limit, but you want to put in anything if you're working in a specific country in Africa and one of your team members is from there, that would be a great place to showcase that, but you don't need to showcase where everybody is from and, only the relevant stuff. And then you're also allowed to kind of put in a little space that says a team member that you're looking for. So we're very cognizant of the fact that this is a process. It changes, people pivot, things happen. And so if you haven't gotten that team member in place, you can put a space to say this is the type of person, the type of researcher, the type of skill set we're looking for, and that's totally fine. We understand. And it's great that you call it out. Oh, yes, questions.
Yeah, any questions on all of that?
If we're working with a certain, like, let's say engineer or a mentor, should we add them to our team bios, or should we add them to the
Application?
application?
Very, very good question. So you guys might have noticed in the application, it has the number of team members. We're actually just capturing in the application the student team members. So you are absolutely allowed to have non-students in your pre-proposal, and as you mentioned, if they're an advisor that you've been working with, you want to call them out because that skill set is relevant. But in the application, the data that we're trying to capture is only on the student participants, so you just wouldn't include them there.
Okay. And you said like partnership for the proposed innovation part. So should we add them there or like directly to team bios, because it's two different places?
Okay. That I think is a little bit dependent on your innovation. In my mind, I'm thinking that if there's a key partnership, like an organization that you want to work with, that would make sense to put it in the proposed innovation section. But if there's a specific individual that you don't have on your team yet, but you would like as an advisor or something, that might be more appropriate for the team bio. So I think it really depends on the flow and the context. If you want, do you want to describe your problem or your innovation at all? And
I think I kind of got it, because like, for example, we work with footprint possibilities, but I'll just add them to the partnership part, and like maybe our actual advisor to team bios part.
yeah, that's totally fine. And one size doesn't fit all. So if you guys have questions about that, we can stay after and do a little bit of one-on-one advising as well. How are you guys feeling? Are you like tired? Do you need some more? We got iced tea in the back. We got pizza. Please eat all the pizza.
How is it about the team members? Do they have to be present? Because I have like two team members from Germany. And
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, they can be located anywhere in the world. As long as they're committed to the project and you show that, that's fine. We have many teams that have interdisciplinary teams from all over the world. And as long as you can demonstrate that they're willing to participate remotely, that's fine.
Other questions?
You could hear a pin drop. You guys are great. So we're going to move on to a real life pre-proposal that we've used in previous years. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. If you're sitting next to partners, feel free to look at the pre-proposal. You'll notice that it has a few images in there. This is not necessary or required, but in this case, it was used in a specific way. I would say the next part that we're going to do in about 5 minutes is just talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the pre-proposal, and hopefully we can generate some type of discussion that you guys can later apply to your own projects. So feel free to like stand up, stretch a little bit, talk with your table mates, and get more pizza, get more iced tea, and I'm gonna walk around, and if you guys have any questions for me in the meantime, feel free. So, I also didn't let you know, which apologies, is if you go to that link, bigideascontest.org/rules, and you scroll down, you'll have the PikaPen example, but you'll also have 2 other examples. So a question I got is, do you have to follow a format where you have headings for each one because the PikaPen example doesn't have that? No, you'll see that the other 2 examples explore different categories and have different formats. Now, I'll also let you know that in this pre-proposal example, they do use kind of a little prototype image that they used, but there's no expectation that you have a prototype or you have a product at hand. A lot of our most innovative solutions have just been like a really accurate description of what you want to create, what you want to achieve. So, without further ado, I would love to make this a little interactive if possible. And I'm wondering if you guys noticed any strengths in this proposal that you could kind of call out. Yeah.
This mic here, I have a cheat sheet.
Okay. And you guys might get a little gift if you participate. We're gonna bribe you. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's a tote bag. Think of all the things you can put in there.
So versatile.
Oh, yes. Well, why don't you call it out? I can repeat it.
Okay, so I thought they did a good job of using statistics. They
Okay.
thoughtfully used statistics, and they mentioned a few of their competitors without being competitive.
Great.
And
So use stats and research, and then called out their competitors in a thoughtful way. And anything else?
still positive, yes?
Oh, we can go on the weakness side too if you want.
I was missing the emotion.
Ooh, okay.
I thought they used statistics generally. I thought they could have been a little bit more specific with the small group of autistic children they talked about. Like I didn't get the emotional connection, so I feel like it should be sort of emotion and statistics, or maybe a little steel and velvet. And I got mostly steel.
Yeah.
Lacking the human elements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those lacking
Yeah.
human elements.
Yeah, that can be a delicate dance of connecting the statistics with like the human element, but in this pre-proposal, it would really benefit them.
And so I think that's a good reminder to have a mix of people on your team. So this proposal was written by mostly engineers, and it kind of reads like it was written by engineers. And if they'd had someone else who could maybe bring that human element to the proposal, it would have been even stronger. So interdisciplinary teams are crucial. How about some others? Let's go ahead and call it out.
Oh, yeah, you can use this.
On the second page, it says that the pen should be sold at a lower cost than other devices so that access issues are reduced, but then it doesn't go into how those lower costs would be achieved because it seems like this is a very intricate pen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So as we've stated many, many times, we're not focusing on like the return on investment for your innovation, but this doesn't point out what lower costs are or how that's actually going to be financially sustainable to the audience or their target audience. So if your innovation is cheaper than others, how much cheaper is it, and how does that affect your target population? Especially in the competitive landscape, you know, some of your competitors might offer a very innovative solution that it's at a price point that doesn't reach a large audience, and that's where you can come in, but you in those situations, you do have to call out more specific numbers. So, yeah, great.
Building on that point too, of using terminology without explaining.
Building on that example of using terminology without explaining, they said it needed to be aesthetically appealing and fun to use, and as if that's objective. So, I'm sure there's lots of research on what children, and specifically children within this demographic, might like in the way of the texture and color. So it seemed like they should talk about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's tough when you're trying to fit so much into 3 pages, right? Because you could probably spend a full page talking about what would be aesthetically pleasing, but it's just finding that balance of when you throw out a point like that, just giving it a little more meat so that it's not really vague. How about some other pros? Anyone? What did you think? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's a really good point. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Like, they're just pretty, or no?
I feel like it helps to actually imagine the product, and it shows that they know what they want to build, at least for now.
Yeah. Yeah, it breaks up the text. It jumps off the page. The first thing you see is their vision for what the product will be. And I think especially for the hardware examples or the hardware proposals, that's an important piece. But again, it's not required that you have that design component. But if you can get there, it certainly helps.
And anything else? Yes.
I think they really described the problem very good.
Yeah.
They talked a lot about the problem and the statistics proof.
So they describe the problem pretty well, and they have the statistics to talk about the problem. So that seems like a plus.
Do you think they touched on the social impact element enough? Was that clear? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that's, another thing to keep in mind is there are lots of problems out there, but you'll have to tie it back to what the social impact is.
And then just one other thing that you notice is that the statistics used in the problem statements was really great, but you might notice that there was no statistics on children with autism. So that's their target population. So yeah, you just want to be mindful that some of the statistics and research were really great, but if your target population is children with autism, you might want to be a little bit more specific about that.
Yeah, any other thoughts, pros, cons, questions you had as you were reading this?
I think they did a good job of not overusing the images. Like each image had a purpose, and it was there for a reason.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a bunch of pretty pictures.
Yeah, and that's especially important if you decide to include photos, which you are welcome to do. But if that photo doesn't tell a compelling story or doesn't really add to your proposal, then you're just losing that space. So yeah, be really strategic when you use visuals.
On the team biographies section, I think that they did a good job of explaining how technical all of them are, but I think it's very repetitive because since I already have a good idea that they're very technical, it seems like you don't have to repeat every project that they've worked on separately. They can just say, technical team is these people with these skills to give more space for other parts.
Yeah. They don't really have an operations person or all of those maybe softer skills that are really important when you're trying to scale up a new innovative idea.
And they don't say they need it.
Yeah, and they don't call out that they're looking for those types of people at this point. Great.
Yeah, you guys were awesome. You were calling out all the things.
Yeah.
So like-minded team members, that's fine, but use that section in a way that kind of highlights the different parts of your innovation that are addressed. Okay, so shall we move on to the last section, the competitive analysis? And then afterwards, if any of you guys have ideas and you want some one-on-one advising from Francis or I, we'll stick around. But I'm going to switch gears, hand it over to Francis, and bring up just the other resource.
Yeah. I can pull it up if you want to hand out tote bags to everyone.
Yes, I do.
Oh, not you.
Everybody gets a bag.
Woo! It's like Oprah. All right, so I know it's getting late, so we'll try and keep this as brief as possible. But as Danny mentioned earlier, we wanted to take some time tonight to focus on the competitive landscape analysis, because that's definitely an area that we hear from judges that students struggle with. And in my role, I'm helping to recruit and manage our network of judges and mentors. So I'm the person who's closest to them. I hear I get a lot of feedback from them, and this is something that is really important. And I think a strong landscape analysis shows that you've really done your homework, and we want to help you prepare for that. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is what's expected in the landscape analysis. And over the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to share some general tips and then discuss how to get started. And then we'll look at 3 different models that you can use. So I just want to caveat all of this by saying, you only have about a half a page to devote to this. So really boiling down the landscape research to the most essential points is critical. So why it matters. As we've discussed earlier, the innovation component is heavily weighted in the pre-proposal round, and a key part of that is convincing a judge that your ideas, or a key part of convincing a judge that your idea is innovative, is your assessment of what others have done and where they fall short. So your proposed innovation should hone in on those shortcomings and offer a better solution. And the landscape analysis provides both context that helps the judges understand why you've decided to frame your idea in a certain way, the different decisions you've decided to make, and without that context, the judges would be evaluating your idea in a bubble. So we're just going to go over a couple general tips. The first is to find the gaps and don't get lost in the details. So you want to avoid simply describing what a competitor does and focus in on the gaps and shortcomings in their offerings, and then really show where there's room for improvement. So I think PicaPen did this really well. They talk about their competitors, but they have just a really brief description of what each one is, and they talk about where they fall short. So with the limited space that you have, you can really only focus in on a handful of competitors. So try and make those as representative of the landscape as possible. And the second tip is to learn from the past. So as we all know, innovation is tricky. A lot of projects are piloted but don't last. So if you can find, or if you can't find current competitors, try and look back to see what's been done before. And then, if possible, try reaching out to those people. I feel like a lot of the people that I know that are working in the innovation space love to share lessons learned and tell you about all the pitfalls to watch out for. So, if you find a group that maybe tried something similar, but it didn't work out, I would recommend reaching out to whoever the team lead for that was. And you might be able to avoid, whatever tripped them up. And so the next tip is to start local and then look global. So, start by assessing your competitors for your specific target population. This could be out-of-work mimes in Berkeley. Uh, so there might not be anyone working on that exact same problem at that micro level. So you'll want to expand your search wider to find similar products and services at the state, national, and international level. So when you're putting together your proposal, it's okay to talk about competitors who maybe aren't reaching the same target market that you have in mind if it's a small group. But if they have a similar idea, you can kind of talk about how yours relates to theirs. And the last thing to remember, which I think Danny mentioned, is that your competitors can become your partners. So by understanding the other players in the space, you might realize that your work complements theirs, and you can propose a mutually beneficial partnership. So before I move on, are there any questions on these tips? No? Okay. So one thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit is determining your value proposition. And that's really a key element of the Big Ideas process, that honing in on your value proposition. And it's totally okay if at this point you're still figuring that out. It's completely normal. And I really think that the landscape research will help you get a better sense of what sets your idea apart. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what makes your big idea better than the existing alternatives? Is it faster, cheaper, more reliable, higher quality, healthier, all of these different things. And then, going beyond that, you have to remember to explain to the judges why that matters to your target group. So last year we had a team in the hardware for good category called VIDI that came up with a surgical tool tracking system that is more efficient than the current process. And the reason that matters is it allows nurses to spend more time with patients. So, it's great if you're faster, but what is the impact of that? So I know we have a small group, but we did want to make this, a little more interactive. If you could just spend maybe 2 minutes talking to people near you about, what you think makes your idea stand out, and then why that matters. So again, it's okay if at this point you're not totally sure. Maybe someone else in this room can help you figure that out. So
Yeah, also, it's a great brainstorm opportunity. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll come around too.
yeah, so let's just do 2 minutes, chat with someone that you don't know, and just share your idea, and just try and boil it down to why is it better than what else is out there.
open. It's not set. Yeah, exactly. So our tenant is building a lot of things. And so there's this company called Systems, which houses all house things for the water.
So like they're doing a lot of like innovative stuff, like building the largest indoor farm, vertical farm in the world in Dubai, and doing a lot of like large scale stuff like that. But they on their website claim, in the future we might be looking for usage of solar energy, but it's not something that they currently do. So I'm really trying to see how viable it is to like accelerate that process and potentially use some like local incentives and state incentives that are trying to promote launch efficient.
Okay, in the last 30 seconds, try and boil down to what makes your big idea better. Like in one word, what is your competitive advantage? Go. In one word? What about it is better? All right, we're gonna break back into these groups in the next minute. So let me just talk about competitors for a second, and then you can chat again. All right, so when you're starting your landscape analysis, you want to remember to include both direct and indirect competitors. And I think a good way to do that is to just put yourself in your user's shoes and think about the different options they have to solve the problem that you're focused on. So, like I said, you're going to get back into your groups now and just talk about how people are currently solving the problem that you're focused on and try and identify one direct and one indirect competitor. And about 2 minutes because I know it's getting late, so.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna move it right along so we can finish in maybe the next 10 minutes, and then we can continue to chat. So I'll go through this one really quickly. As you're doing your research, just remember your landscape research is not expected to be exhaustive, but saying that you have no competitors is not an option. Everyone has competitors. So, when you're looking at online resources, I would recommend looking beyond academic journals. For a lot of this innovative work, it doesn't always end up in those spaces. So try and find publications from organizations that are doing similar work. Check out databases like AngelList or Crunchbase for startups. You might be able to find project blurbs on other innovation contests websites. So really cast a wide net. And then in terms of in-person research, if it's possible to conduct interviews with your users, that's great. It shows the judges that you're getting that direct feedback, but it's definitely not required. So each project will be different and it'll be more or less feasible. If you can't reach your users directly, maybe you can speak to another organization that knows them well, that maybe serves them in some capacity. So finding those other programs out there is great. Professors are obviously another resource that you have. And if you're really getting stuck, I would recommend coming in and talking to our team. We might have someone in our network that we can connect you with who has the expertise that you're looking for. So we're always here as a resource for you.
And we really love this part of the job. So don't feel apprehensive or like oh, I already saw them, that's fine. Like, we live for this stuff, so come often.
Yeah. Any questions before I run through 3 different tools you can use? No? Okay. So I'll go over these 3 tools, but just want to say, these are just 3 different ways you can do this. As you saw in the Pika Pen example, they just had a narrative format. We've seen a lot of bulleted lists in proposals. These can also just be a way to help you structure your own research, and just you can have it as a reference but not included in your proposal. So yeah, let me go to the first one. So the 2x2 matrix is a really common tool, and it's a simple way to show how you measure up to competitors on 2 key metrics. So you'll choose those 2 metrics based on what's most important to your users. So let's say for a food venture, it could be something like affordability and healthiness. And this tool is most useful when you're looking to demonstrate your position and value in simple terms. So with the food example, your 2x2 would show the range of food options available for a customer. And if you are in the healthy and affordable corner of the matrix, the judges will be able to quickly understand that your positioning and the value you provide. But one pitfall to avoid with this tool is putting all of your competitors in one quadrant, like the bad quadrant, and then having yourself as the only person who's over there in the shining, wonderful corner. Almost every market has a range of different players, and it's okay to show that there are others in that same space as you. That, in a lot of ways, just means that there's a market there. The next tool is the competitive feature analysis, and this really provides a snapshot view for a judge and allows them to compare your product or service across several key features. So try to hone in on the features that are most important. This shouldn't be a laundry list of everything that your product or service has. You really want to find the most important ones. And then also try and keep your list of competitors to a reasonable number. So I think 2 to 5 is good. You're not, you don't need to assess, how you compare to like 20 different groups. And then one pitfall to avoid here is checking all the boxes in your column. So it's good to be aspirational, but at this point, the judges understand that you're still at an early stage. And as we talked about before, being honest with them about what you have already and then where you're looking to grow, different features that maybe you would hope to add on in the future. Just be honest and don't feel like you have to check all of those boxes. There might be other groups that are better at certain things than you are. And you can talk about that in the narrative of the proposal.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Okay, so the last one, which maybe looks the craziest, is the petal diagram. And so this was actually developed by Steve Blank, who I'm sure some of you are familiar with. He's a lecturer at Haas and a champion of the lean startup methodology. And this tool is most useful when your idea is at the intersection of multiple existing markets. So in the example, you can see how Slack is attempting to solve multiple problems that other companies are solely focused on. So like real-time collaboration is something that Skype does, online file sharing is something that Dropbox does, and this is showing that Slack is addressing all of those different areas. So I think if the heart of your innovation is in bundling features into one product or service that solves multiple problems rather than, let's say, making significant advancements in any one area, then this could be a good tool for you to use to show the judges that you're really tackling all these different problems, but maybe using kind of standard approaches, but it's that bundling effect that's what's innovative. So one thing to remember with this tool is that you'll still need to discuss your value proposition within each petal. You don't have to have 5 petals. I've seen this with 2 petals, with 6 petals. It's just, it's up to whatever your project is focused on. So those are the 3 diagrams, the 3 tools. But again, you can use these if they make sense for your project. If they don't, you can just do more of a narrative format.
Yeah, I would say it's a really great tool to just help you focus, especially if you find that you have a lot of competitors in your space and you're trying to figure out, well, which features do I address, which ones do they address, or like if I'm bundling things. It's just a great practice to have. And it can help you in different ways throughout your project process. And I've, worked with companies and organizations that use this at different stages. So it's something to familiarize yourself with now, and it can be a big asset for you down the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, not necessary to include it, but only if you think that it's helpful.
Yeah, and I really think that doing that research and seeing what else is out there, looking for those gaps, is how you start to hone in on what your innovative idea is. So, devoting 2 weeks to that and then like really hitting the ground and writing out everything. Like you want to make sure you do that research so that the judges really know that you understand the space and how you fit into it. Does anyone have questions about any of these tools or just the landscape analysis section in general?
If any of you are interested in this slide deck, Francis, do you think we could make it available to
Yeah,
them?
we'll include a link on the workshops page
Perfect.
on the website.
Yeah, so you guys can have that.
Yep.
Should we talk about competitive advantages?
Yeah. So I think that's the way Pika Pen did it really well. They would mention a competitor, say what they did in like 5 words, and then kind of show where they fell short. And then, as you're talking about your innovation, that's where you say, that it's going to be price competitive or it's going to be more efficient in this way. And you don't have to directly compare your product to each individual one. You can just say, generally, this is what we see the market looks like, and this is how we're aiming to address that.
You guys are so awesome for sticking around.
Yeah, thank you.
While we kind of close up shop, if anyone wants some one-on-one feedback, please let us know. Eat all of the pizza, drink all of the iced tea, and thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.